Welcome everyone to this Fortuna session. And today we're going to be focusing on letters of recommendation. Very timely. I think if you're looking at round one, you should be in the midst of it. If you're planning for round two, we have amazing tips and understanding behind why, who you should ask, and kind of game planning. So we're going to jump right into it. So next slide, please. And just to give you a brief introduction on the speaker today, hello everyone, I'm Michelle Belden. I'm a director at Fortuna. Previously, I was an associate director of admissions at Wharton, and I am very excited to be here with you all today, along with Emma and Tatiana. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Emma Bond. I spent quite a few years working at London Business School as their senior manager of MBA admissions. Loved it. I'm a proper admissions geek. And then I moved from LBS to the Boston Consulting Group. So I moved to the other end of the pipeline, bringing people into the MBA programs at to the consulting roles at BCG, both for the UK offices and also globally. So I joined Fortuna right back in the beginning, so 2012, I think. So I've been here ever since, absolutely love it, and really happy to be here today.
And I am Tatiana Nemo. I graduated from Stanford Business School, and ever since I graduated, I really enjoyed the application process so much that I have been offering originally in a pro bono basis, and since 2017 as part of Fortuna, offering guidance, coaching, and working with individuals that are interested in applying to business programs. But on a parallel track, I have remained in business. So I have crossed many industries, starting with McKinsey, going from financial services into chemicals, beer, soft drinks, now asset management. So bringing that angle, of the business side of things, particularly from a corporate strategy lens, but with the knowledge and the track record of having interviewed for the school for 16 years before joining Fortuna.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay. So just look quickly at our agenda. As you'll see, we have lots of things to cover. And like I said, we're going to go through all the ins and outs of letters of recommendation. And so if we'll just go to the next slide, and we're going to jump right in and start with, why do the recommendations even matter? Or why are they still asking for them? Why do they ask for them? And I think we're going to go ahead, and Tatiana, I would love for you to kind of take us through, from the admissions side, right? Especially what are they, looking for, understanding of, what are they expectation wise of when they read these letters of recommendation?
Of course. And I mean, there are many reasons why recommendation letters are a very important component, to the full application package, and they can make a very key difference, And so, first off, these the letters of recommendation, they offer this outside view of your impact and your character, and that is told ideally from a credible witness, from a credible participant, close participant to your career progression and performance. They can attest to how you have impacted the groups that you have worked in, individuals, how you have brought about certain of the behaviors that they're going to be looking for, like a strategic mindset, like someone that feels comfortable stepping into a void of leadership and leading a team, someone that is always seeking win-win situations and outcomes. It's not zero-sum, and it's not leaving dead bodies left and right, but building relationships so that people want to work with you again and again and again. So that's the piece, first off, that outside view of something that is brought about in a credible manner. Also, it's an opportunity to highlight the strengths that are not visible on the one-dimensional pieces of a GPA, of a GMAT score, or even if a career progression can be tracked on the resume, that added flavor, that bringing you to life. This is a good opportunity, to be exercised in the letter of recommendation. Third off, it shows, again, just as I was alluding to that team leadership, to that building partnerships, it alludes in a very granular manner, because the recommendation is for these letters not to express generalities or platitudes, but to go into very particular instances, experiences, projects, initiatives in which you have manifested in a granular manner these performance. And so it, again, it makes you jump off the page in a way that the other pieces of the application could probably be limited to that regard. Then this also validates that ambition, that sense of progression. It validates your potential from someone that, if we choose the recommenders properly, someone that is credible from the perspective that they have had a track record of having, like that professional interaction with individuals. That's going to be assessed through the title, through their experience, etc. But that they can validate from that very credible perspective how you have performed. And finally, just as I was mentioning, all pieces of the application form are super relevant. However, if you have a very strong recommendation and you were going tied tete-a-tete, with another candidate, a very strong recommendation letter or set of recommendation letters can tip the scales. And so that's why this is not just a to-do to be crossed from the list. This is a very powerful piece of real estate that can make the difference in your application.
Absolutely. I love what you just said, a powerful piece of real estate. It is really critical. And to that last point, let's jump to the next slide, because it's really what you just said. What is going to make that powerful recommendation? What does that mean? So Tatiana, maybe you can continue and kind of give us more specifics about why is it important, as we look, what makes a great letter of recommendation?
Absolutely. And so just as I was making reference to stay completely away from generalities or platitudes or take my word for it, kind of fan letter wording in terms of saying, I'm the highest person in this organization, take my word for it, so and such candidate is phenomenal. That is not going to make the difference. We need someone that's credible, starting with someone that works closely with you, that has had some level of supervising ascendance over you, that they can decide on your growth, your promotions, your salary increases, all that good stuff, and provide key insightful feedback that that gives and embodies the credibility on the recommender. And then going to the extent of talking about very specific instances. In such and such project, so and so stepped into this void of leadership and was willing and ready to, lead the pack, or, whatever the case may be. So it is time well spent introspecting, going back to thinking, what were those particular moments, those particular initiatives that can be talked about and that demonstrate, like the myriad of different leadership behaviors that the admissions committee is going to be looking for, finding evidence for. And then, it dovetails nicely into, like this is also, what makes a good letter of recommendation. It's clear evidence of a close working relationship. Because in choosing your recommender, it's not only the witness capacity of having observed and worked with you, but it's lovely as well if you can find someone that is somewhat emotionally invested in you, morally invested, like they want to see you succeed. And so, that's also a lovely piece of evidence that you have that capacity of building rapport, of building relationships, of not only having a transactional nature, in your interactions. Also, this brings about, and what makes it, like a good recommendation, it's an authentic voice and a professional tone, because you can always ask a recommendation of a family member, right? It's kind of a nice to have, but that's not going to bring that professional tone. And so having that level of interaction in which the roles have been clearly established. There's a supervisory, role of someone that can clearly and credibly attest, to your performance. And so that is also what makes a good recommendation. And then finally, it's not just about putting you on a pedestal and projecting you as a finished product. It's really that you're work in process. And so it is so important to as much leverage the strengths, the value, and the clear cutting edge that you bring to the table as to depict where have been the moments in which you have received constructive and meaningful pieces of feedback and how you have integrated that. Because to some degree that speaks about your capacity to learn from others. It speaks about your level of emotional intelligence, and it speaks about the capacity to integrate the feedback and then in turn manifest it, into action. And so, yeah, in short, like that's what makes a really, really good, powerful recommendation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tatiana. I think that has really set our tone and, what is why the letter of recommendation, what makes it great. So if we go to the next slide, and I'm going to throw it to Emma, is now the question of the big question, who to ask, right? So we're going to start there. The next slide, we'll see maybe who not to ask. But really the focus is now that you have a better understanding of what are they really looking for, why are they asking for this letter of recommendation? Now, who are going to be the best two people to really go ahead and request that they write this on your behalf? So Emma.
Thanks. Yeah. And this is one of the questions that comes up so often when we start working with clients, isn't it? They come to us with a list of people and they're like, well, I could ask this person who's my direct supervisor, or I've got this person who I've reported into on a couple of projects this year, or the CEO has said that I'm going to write a he or she is going to write a recommendation for me. So, who should I choose? And one of the things that you really should spend time doing at the beginning of this process is working out who is the right person. Now, some of the schools will ask specifically that you use your direct supervisor. For many people, that is usually the best choice. As Tatiana said, you want somebody who can speak very sort of meaningfully about your day-to-day, your responsibilities, your achievements, your strengths, the areas you still need to grow. So where possible, a direct supervisor is a good choice. So someone who works with you, who knows you well. They may have been doing performance reviews with you, but in some situations that's not always possible. And then there are different sort of avenues you can choose if you're in a family business. Somebody directly who you are reporting into might not be suitable, so you might use a client, or if you are in a sort of startup, it might be somebody who's further up the organization. But whoever you choose, firstly, you need to make sure that they really can sort of speak in a detailed way about your sort of the trajectory and the journey that you've had and the responsibilities that you have in the workplace day to day. I think the third point, so Tatiana touched on it a little bit, it's really, really important, as well as that somebody knows you well, that you feel that the person that you choose is really invested in you. So as a professional, they have some idea of what your sort of short and long-term career goals look like. They understand why an MBA is important to you. They're somebody that appreciates the value of an MBA, so it's not really a great idea to choose somebody who's not on board with your planning. So mentors can be a great person to choose if you've had somebody in the organization who perhaps might not be your direct supervisor at the current time, but they've been sort of part of your journey. They've seen your promotions, they've supported you in the different positions that you've held. Somebody like that is useful. I think if you are choosing between two people and you think, okay, both of these people, sort of, I work with them daily, they've seen me in meetings, they've seen me with clients, think about somebody who can be coachable as well. And I know that sounds sort of maybe slightly contradictory, but actually what you want is somebody who you can go to, who will listen while you talk about the process with them, who will sort of have time available to commit to this process. If you are applying to several schools, it's actually quite time consuming for both you and your recommender. So some of the schools in the US use the common LOR, so there are similar questions, but even if they do, there are different word counts. So, you know, Columbia for their first question, I think actually Columbia across the full LOR will have 1,000 words. Harvard has 300 for the first question and then 250 for the second. Stanford different. So you really need to sort of have somebody who is on board with your journey and who's really supporting you and who will be willing to sort of portray you in the very best light. And then the last point here, so avoid picking someone based solely on seniority. And it's a very common thing that people will come to us and say, but, you know, the VP or the CEO or, you know, somebody who's sort of in the C-suite team is willing and ready to do the recommendation for me. And depending on the size of the organization, obviously, but often that's really not the best choice. If you're in a very small, compact organization with not a great number of employees, then it can be okay because they will have oversight. They will be able to sort of speak to your competencies. They will be able to talk about your areas for growth. But if you are in any really even medium-sized to bigger business, the likelihood is that somebody who is at that level of the organization, so in, you know, those sort of upper echelons of leadership, will not really have the same amount of input to be able to give to your examples. They won't be able to speak in sort of, I guess, as impactful a way about what your contributions have been. And they also potentially will not have the time or the ability to sort of set aside quite a chunk of a few hours to actually commit to this. So I think, yeah, you should be careful who you ask, be willing to pick somebody who knows you well, preferably a supervisor if you can, but somebody who is on board with your journey and who really supports the whole kind of concept of doing an MBA. I think one thing to just mention there is that if you can't pick your direct supervisor, schools are really cognizant of the fact that maybe, you know, you can't for various reasons, which we'll talk about in a minute, but there is usually room in an optional essay or something to sort of cover why you've not chosen that person.
Yeah, absolutely, Emma. And I think this slide is just so important because, like Emma said, who should you ask? We have discussions right away with our clients, go through the list. But that last point, number 4, it still comes up all the time. But this VP could write it for me. And again, just having those discussions. And I think the best one, number 3, and I think Tatiana said, emotionally invested in you. It is really the thoughtfulness that they'll bring, the guidance you can give them. All these points that Emma and Tatiana have said are really, if you now can sit back and really brainstorm and think about that, and the people that are on your list, it's going to get you to the right decision. So let's go to the next slide, because now it is really, if we're kind of know where we should go, it's what should we stay away from? So Emma, take us into the maybe who not to ask, as we'll just continue to, it looks like number 1 is that high profile individual.
Yeah,
so I think you covered that, but it can mean quickly. And then, you know, there are a couple people that are ways that you want to stay away to help guide you to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think sometimes also, even at MBA level, people sometimes will think back to a professor or somebody that they got on well with, maybe at college, who they potentially the candidate really excelled in their class, and they think, oh, that person is a professor, so they would have a lot to say about me. So I think, you know, they might be a high profile individual, but they're not necessarily going to be able to give the context to your working experience. So, you know, that kind of thing can generally be struck off the list. There are actually a couple of schools in Europe who don't mind you using somebody from your university, but generally speaking, most schools are very much into having a professional recommender, because, you know, you will have done 3, 4, 5, 6 years plus of work experience, so you're actually a long way out from college. The second point, so someone who lacks objectivity, so a family member in a family business. Now, some schools actually do stipulate that you don't use somebody who is related to you for obvious reasons, because it's going to be really nice to go to your mum and say, yeah, you know, mum, please write me a recommendation letter. And she's going to say, what a great person you are, and all of those sort of warm, fuzzy things. But in terms of an admissions committee, the objectivity just isn't there. And that's going to be a subjective piece of written work, which doesn't really give them that kind of sort of helicopter view of you in the workplace. So as I was saying before, if you are in a family business, and you know, again, as Michelle says, this is a conversation we have with clients sort of often. But there are ways around it. Maybe that you have a professional mentor who's been invested in your journey through 1 or 2 different companies. Maybe if you have worked in a company previously and then joined the family business. So I'm working with somebody at the moment, one of my clients who's in that position. So he has actually chosen to go back to his previous organization and brought in a recommender from his time there. He's lucky because it's fairly recent, so it's not too long ago. But sometimes you can use a client, so somebody that you've worked on a really strong project with. They've seen sort of your project wins, and they've interacted with you. They've had meetings with you. They've seen the recommendations that you've brought to their business, perhaps. So somebody that again knows you well, but it doesn't always have to be your direct supervisor, because yeah, sometimes that's just not feasible. So alums, again, I have this situation, somebody actually, Michelle, who's applying to Wharton, and they have somebody on the recommendation list who's a Wharton alum, but their recommender who they wanted, who's the Wharton alum, has not had any interaction with them in the workplace. So I've had to have a conversation with them and say, okay, you know, for the professional recommendation that Wharton asks for, this person is perhaps not the best choice, because even though they went to Wharton and even though they know the school and they're able to kind of, you know, comment on how you would interact in terms of the school community and your fit with the culture, they can't talk about your workplace performance. They don't know how you've demonstrated leadership in your project work. They don't know how you interact in a team. They don't know how you sort of are able to persuade people up the organization, down the organization. They don't know how you take decisions under pressure. So even though you might know an alum through a kind of family relationship, it's not generally recommended that you use them in the professional capacity. The last one. So this is my favorite one on here, I have to say, because we strongly recommend that you don't choose a recommender who is likely to either delegate writing to an assistant or just, you know, not do it, or ask you to do it yourself. So again, realistically, if someone is too busy, if they're too senior, they may not have the time to dedicate to this kind of task. So if you think that there's somebody who's going to hand it down to a junior or to a PA or to somebody else because they don't have the time, again, with the best will in the world, even if they really want to support you, the piece of work that they produce on your behalf is going to be one person removed. So the assistant is not going to be able to talk about the details of your projects, of your work, of your role within the organization. How are you affecting the strategy? You know, all of those things. So pick somebody who is on your side. I would say that the emotional investment carries on into making sure that it's somebody who will be able to give up time to do this for you and to really position you in the best light. Because as Tatiana said, you know, this can be the make or break. If you're balanced, if you're weighing up at a sort of even level with another candidate, a poor recommendation can really torpedo your chances, and a really strong one can just tip you over into an offer. So they really are important.
Absolutely. I think sometimes people don't really get that. So I'm glad we are doing this webinar, because they are very important. And going to the next slide, there are some tricky situations that you can find yourself in. So have Tatiana, if you could take us through these and how to think about, you know, these situations and to kind of navigate that.
Absolutely. And so first off, like just before ruling out your current boss, just think about, probably not having broached the right conversation or opened the right lane of conversation in terms of asking for the feedback or requesting, for the task. And sometimes, I mean, it has happened to me with various applicants. They end up being so surprised by the warm reaction from the current boss, how supportive they were. The applicant approached the conversation or the request with trepidation and maybe even worry about being rejected. And they were met with kind of a warmth, supportive reaction. And so probably it's just because in some instances you have not had the opportunity to, request something of this nature. And so think first and try to test the waters, try to take the pulse of things before ruling out the current boss, because certainly current managers are, kind of the ideal recommender, at least for one out of the two recommenders. And so, like sometimes it's because of being hesitant or being afraid of the rejection or not having had the previous evidence that there's the warmth or the desire for the support. So kick the tires, right, before you take things off the table. Secondly, be open to having an honest conversation in terms of someone willing to support you, but maybe offering feedback that had not been offered, in your annual process of performance or in any other forum. And so there might be a situation in which someone is very willing to support you, but they are sensitive to making reference to certain areas of growth, that probably you had not broached in a prior conversation. And so, again, it's in doubling down on that recommendation on the first point. Be open and courageous, in having that conversation and reaching out and requesting before you shot that as an option. Third, if for some situation, that that the current supervisor is not going to be supportive of the MBA, or that it's going to push a button in which you're going to go into frozen mode, because if you are planning on going on an MBA, then they're not going to consider you for further growth opportunities. Like if there's going to be truly a downside and you know about it because it has been expressed or it's kind of part of the culture, or so then if you need to use a different recommender, just as Emma was mentioning and providing some of the options, there is always that room of the optional essay that Emma alluded to, in which, and you can use that optional essay to explain pretty much anything, but it can be devoted to explaining what was the circumstance that made you not lean on the current supervisor. And again, admissions committees are very well seasoned to different aspects of culture, different aspects or downsides, to furthering your career in case like there's not a positive outcome, whatever the situation may be. And so yes, like if you have kicked the tires and it's really not an option, don't despair. You can make your case. In terms of not only alternatives to the current supervisor, but of thinking of that second supervisor or that second recommender, as some schools request, the 2 letters of recommendation, great alternatives are going back to former managers, and that's also really nice, because then you're not only adding that credible third-party perspective and angle, but you're adding that timing factor in which you might have a manager that was just as supportive earlier in your career, and then you can anchor on those instances and examples. You can anchor how you have progressed, in terms of your experience in your former life with the former job and the former manager, and then the current one. So former managers are also, like a great alternative to access for recommenders. Just as Emma was mentioning, in case of being probably in a family business in which it's not, like it's not going to be the current supervisor an alternative for the reasons that I mentioned before, but because it might not make it credible being a family member, then you can always reach out to clients, even vendors, like individuals that have seen you perform along the lines and dimensions of those leadership behaviors that the admissions committee are going to be looking for the evidence. And then they can credibly, from a different angle, attest to your performance and how you have participated, in different professional instances. And also mentors, can be a really good alternative. I've had, several applicants, they are consultants, and so they have their current engagement manager that, they can give one angle, but then normally they have a mentor that have known them throughout all the staffing allocations, during their lifetime at the firm or any other situation. So mentors are also, like a very, very good alternative. And some of the programs, they ask explicitly that at least one of the recommenders has been operated as a supervisor. So that also helps to complement and build a story, just as building the story and building it throughout time, like with the combination of former manager, current supervisor, also having that voice of mentor, might be, it completes things really nicely.
I agree. I think it's a real strategy that you're taking when you're trying to put those two together and thinking about the best two. So I think you going through all these is really helpful. And number three, especially, we do definitely encourage and support our clients. If you are in that situation, you just can't, request the direct supervisor. Really take advantage of the optional essay. Very brief, a couple sentences, and that's all the admissions committee is a total understanding, and then they move on to look at who you did ask and what they're sharing. So as we go to the next slide, I think this one is pretty critical, is the working with your recommenders. And Emma's going to take us through this because I love the first one, start early. If you're into the round one focus, jump in today. But this is a real, like I mentioned, critical piece to really to have them write the strongest, most, glowing recommendation, because it's not just handing it off to them. So go ahead, Emma, and take us through this slide.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking round one is coming up literally in just over a month. So if you are applying in round one and you haven't spoken with your recommenders, when you get off this webinar, go and find them and talk to them about it. So yeah, I mean, it's when we start working with clients, which can be anything sort of 6 months, sometimes further out, one of the first things we do is identify recommenders with you, and then start working on a brief, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in the slideshow. But starting early means both for you having that period of self-reflection where you start thinking about, okay, sort of what are my traits as a professional? What kind of leader am I? Am I sort of inclusive? Am I intuitive? Am I somebody who is a really strong decision maker under pressure? Start thinking about the kinds of traits and the kind of strengths that you want to share, and then get your recommender on board. Take them aside, have a coffee with them, talk about your journey, explain to them that you are interested in doing an MBA, and then, as it says that, share your goals, your school list, your timeline. So one of the things that you need to do when you are planning your timeline for schools is build out the timeline separately for your recommenders. So making sure that they're aware of the deadlines for the schools that you're applying to, because they might all come in a cluster, like Harvard and Wharton do, and LBS, and all of those schools that come right in that first week of September. You might have a bit of grace. There might be one that's a bit later, like I think MIT is the end of September. So you might be sort of juggling different timelines yourselves, but it's really important to actually share with your recommenders and let them know what that looks like, so that if they're going to be away for the whole of August on holiday, as happens in Europe, often if you're calling in from sort of anywhere in continental Europe, you'll know that most of the offices there sort of shut down for August. So don't sort of leave it to the last minute, because as we said before, this is a big commitment from them. You want to give them time, and it shouldn't really be rushed. when you're sharing your goals, I do think it's really important, and this is something else we do with clients, is to make your recommender aware of what you want to do post MBA, what you want to do sort of longer term. What is the impact that you want to have when you have an MBA under your belt and you're out back in the workplace? Because when your recommenders are chosen carefully, so they know you well in your current sort of environment, and when they understand what those goals are, when they produce a recommendation for you, again, with the help of a brief, they are much more likely to align the sort of strengths and examples that they are giving on your behalf with that kind of trajectory. So if you are looking to sort of move into investment banking, they're going to know what particular skills that you might sort of want to share for that particular goal. So really bring them on board with your goal so that they know sort of where you're heading. And then the school list. So if you are sort of in the round one process now, or if you are doing your sort of due diligence and looking at schools for round two and investigating different school cultures, you'll be finding out that not all schools are created equal. So giving your recommender a heads up on what each school is looking for is also a really, really important part of the process. The recommender brief. So I'm going to skate over this, Michelle, because I think we have a
Yeah.
whole slide dedicated to the brief. But giving them a brief which covers off the logistics of the recommender process, because they may not have done this before. They may not know how this, how the process works. So logistics, give them examples, etc. Giving them a brief to take some of the hard work out of the whole process for them is really, really helpful. But we'll touch on that a bit more in a little while. And then discuss which strengths or stories they could highlight. So in the same way that you need to do some self-reflection and start digging back through your sort of work experience and through your performance reviews and thinking, okay, where can I demonstrate leadership? Where can I demonstrate my team skills? What are the best examples? Having a really frank and open conversation with your recommender can be a really good way of brainstorming together. And I often say this to clients, is that I can, help with the recommender brief, but I can't provide those examples because I'm not with you in the workplace. But having conversations with your recommender ahead of time and sort of saying, okay, these are the kind of traits that I'm looking to highlight. When do you think is the best example of me demonstrating this? And if it's a current supervisor, obviously that's going to be easier to do if they've got that sort of insight on your performance most recently. That can be a really good step to get ahead of the process so that when they come to writing it, they're really aware of the kind of things that you are looking to showcase. So yeah, all of those things, working with your recommenders, building that relationship with them early, explaining to them how important this is and how much impact their input can have on the process for you generally is really important. And yeah, making sure that you have time and you build it out and start early, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And I think to Emma's point with all these things that she's pointed out, this is a journey that you're going to be on together. So it's again,
Yes.
not one conversation. It's not just oh, Emma, could you write my letter of recommendation? Oh, you'll be getting an email, and can you fill it out for me? That's not what that is not what we suggest. And it's really going to take the time for you front end to what you're going to really reflect on, and you want them to speak about what you think, and then having those conversations with them. And we are in about 2 slides, then to put together this recommender brief that we really recommend, and then take them through that. And then it's a pass off. So before we get there, though, the next slide for Tatiana to kind of, go through is the kind of, okay, there are some ethical and red flags just to be aware of that we want to point out. And so Tatiana, if you can take us through those.
Absolutely. And like the first alert, like red flag, and is please, please, please do not write your own letter. Even if the recommender is asking you to do it. And there are various reasons for these. I mean, first off, the ethical piece, but then secondly, like if you have the same tone and the same style of writing that comes through the letters of recommendation and the many other portions that are written in the application package, it's an immediate red flag, and it's kind of sour taste in the admissions committee's mouth in terms of saying, oh, we cannot trust this person. Why would we want to have this person? No, like even if this person looks like so solid in their quants and so solid in their leadership potential. And so, yeah, no, just stay away from that. Even if you are being asked, maybe, that's a sign that probably that's not a good recommender, right? Just as it has been established. Secondly, I mean, this is an interesting piece because what's important is not only to have high quality deliverables in isolation for the application. What you want is something that comes together so nicely, that is complementary, all the bits and pieces of the puzzle, of the application package. Oftentimes, there might be a situation that it's worth tackling from the perspective of the recommender and from the perspective of maybe an impact essay or something that deserves the added insight of the applicant. Having said that, please just, on plain sight, feeling that you're duplicating pieces, and that you are emphasizing too much, or that it feels like it's redundant, make sure that in that overall strategy of the package, that you are making sure that whatever the content in the recommendation letters is going to be complementary to the content elsewhere, in the package. So that again, the ultimate effect of the admissions committee feeling like they are compelled to then ask you to come for an interview, that's the outcome. And then finally, again, push back gently, if a recommender requests you to draft it. One thing is, as part of what Emma was making reference, in the recommender's brief, to provide guidance to maybe tickle the recommender's memory, because you might be more aware of the certain projects that you worked on, rather than the recommender having it top of mind. That's one thing. Very different thing is to already provide, kind of a draft of the recommendation letter. It's going to be incredibly valuable for the recommender to be the one to putting pen to paper, so to speak, or fingers to keyboard. So yeah, just make it clear, that's kind of not an alternative.
Absolutely. And I think if we go to the next slide, it transitions us very well to the recommender brief. And to your point, Tatiana, what I tell my clients, if I do hear they either think they might be asked to write it or they already have been requested, I said, here's our first step. Put together a very comprehensive recommender brief, do some heavy bullet points, for the questions, to do that reminder. They're very busy people. They're not always going to remember all your, key projects. Start there. Provide that to them as Emma's going to take us through, and then see if you continue to get that, right? Like, it is such a hard line, especially if it truly is just going to, they believe, the best person out of two, whatever it is. But I'm sure both of you, it's a hard one. So I'm always like, let's start with the brief, provide that to them, and see where we can go from there. Because just staying away from writing it. So for so many reasons you covered. So let's talk about the recommender brief, Emma.
Yeah, so it is a really tricky one. I'm having particular issues this year. I don't know if you two are seeing the same thing, but more and more my clients are coming back and saying, my recommender said, you write it for me and I'll sign it off and submit it. And it is really not the best idea for all the reasons that Tatiana has covered. And what I tend to do is say, tell them you're working with a coach and your coach has said that that's not a good idea and that they should do it for you. So I try and get my clients to blame me because I'm the third person that, that they can't get mad at me about that.
Yeah.
But one of the very, very best ways to try and make sure that your recommender will write for you on your behalf is to give them this recommender brief. Now, it's something that, we talk about a lot. It's something that we do early on with our clients, and it is a very detailed, actually, our brief, the Fortuna brief, is a very detailed document where we provide the recommender with the types of questions that are going to be asked in the different recommendation forms, and then we guide our clients on how to sort of provide information that will help take the pain out of this process for the recommenders, right? So the more that a recommender sits there and has to scratch their head and try and come up with examples and try and come up with traits and think, you know, when did this person sort of, you know, when did they first get promoted, and then when did they bring that sort of deliverable in on time, and, you know, when did they exceed their targets by, you know, 50% or whatever. It's really difficult for somebody to come up with that kind of information in a short period of time, and then have to put it all into a very sort of, you know, polished professional recommendation letter. And it's sometimes, I think, recommenders just look at that and they think it's too much like hard work. I don't have time to do this. I've got my own stuff that I have to be getting on with. And even if they are very willing, even if they are invested, sometimes they just think, you know, I don't have the information to hand. I'm not going to be able to remember this. So one of the ways of getting around that is by doing this brief and presenting it to your recommender, a summary. So the Fortuna brief, we ask our clients to write a set of bullet points. So we'll sit down with people and we'll work through the strengths. And sometimes, you know, candidates will have a different idea of their own strengths than perhaps we as a coach will have with admissions sort of committee knowledge. So having that conversation with clients, we pull together a sort of summary of their goals, as it says here, achievements, the projects that they've worked on, and then it's presented in a brief, and that then is handed off to, after a bit of often back and forth and a few iterations, handed off to the recommenders to, as I say, sort of take the hard work out of it for them. I think I mentioned a little bit earlier on is that one of the things that that does is also help your recommenders align what they are saying with what you want them to say. And as Tatiana is saying, it's part of producing a very holistic profile for each candidate. So a school wants to know who you are sort of in all different aspects of your personality, of your work experience. They're just not interested in, you know, in a very particularly narrow version of you. So helping your recommender, providing them with concrete examples. I often tell my clients to look at using perhaps the STAR format or the context, action, impact format for their bullets, so that the recommender can look at sort of leadership trait and think, oh yeah, okay, this person did demonstrate this in this particular project at this particular time. They were managing a team of 4 people. You know, they had great feedback from the client, and they help the business sort of increase revenues by X%. So if you give them that detail in the brief, they will hopefully say how glowing, you know, be very glowing about how great you were, but they can also back it up. They can quantify the successes that you've had, but they wouldn't remember that unless, you know, you provide them with these details. So being specific helps with number 3 here, which is the risk of vague or generic letters. So in the same way that you want to make your essays and your application, you want to differentiate yourself, you want to tell your own story, you want to stand out by being individual, by being authentic. Ideally, you want your recommendations to come across the same. So they should support the story that you're telling in the rest of the recommendation, but recommendations that are vague or that don't have those sort of specifics are just not as hard hitting from an AdCom point of view, because they don't sort of say, they don't show how you have been lifted over and above your peer group. So why is it that you're so special that you should be given an interview at Stanford or at Harvard or at Wharton or at INSEAD or at LBS or at any of the other top schools? So yeah, I mean, vague and generic letters are ones that don't talk about specific projects. They don't talk about the impact that you've had on an organization or perhaps on some of the other community initiatives that you might do as part of your role. So very much, you know, providing the details, providing them with a detailed brief helps with the specificity and reduces that risk of generic letters. The last one, so Tatiana mentioned this a little bit, and this is the real danger of having to write your recommendation letters yourself. We talk about an authentic voice in your essays. That's really, really important. But when you have a tone in your recommendations that are the same as your essays, it's an immediate red flag. So if you've provided a brief for your recommender, again, you've given them the bullet points, you've given them the kind of heads up of the kinds of things that you want them to talk about, but then they can take that and run with it. So hopefully they'll say, yes, you're brilliant. Yes, you're great. Yes, you're, demonstrated leadership potential. Yes, you're a creative problem solver. But the way that they write it, they can work it around the brief and they can build it out, and it will be in a different tone of voice than what you are presenting to the committee in your essays. So that's a really important thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. This is a key piece. And I think all of the things that Emma went over and how to put it together is really, again, going to provide your recommender with a document, a tool to really use to write the letter recommendation that you're hoping for. And so we go to the next slide. There are, as we continue to help you guys think about how to look at the letter recommendation, who to ask, there are some things to avoid. So Tatiana, if you can take us through those just to, bring to top of mind, and just to make sure again, the application process itself, there's a lot to cover. So this specific area, what should you make sure that you stay away from?
Yeah, and we have mentioned pretty much all of these, but quick rapid fire, because this is very helpful information. First off, plan ahead. Don't leave it too late. Round one, kind of the summer travel gets on the way. Round two, winter celebrations get on the way. And so definitely plan ahead, cushion yourself, in terms of not giving probably the true deadline to the recommender, giving you a little bit of a buffer there, so that you can maneuver. Because when you submit the application is deemed complete when every single piece of the application is there on time, and one late recommendation letter can derail the whole process. So first off, plan ahead and make sure that you have enough leeway. Secondly, don't maximize for the C-suite flashy title or for anything else that is far removed from your everyday work. If you have the whammy of having, like the flashy title, the closeness of a credible recommender, and the alum of the school that you're going for, well, by all means, leverage that whammy. But if you have to maximize for something, maximize for the credibility and the closeness of the recommender. Please don't put on the same playing field the alum capacity or the prestige, in terms of the glamorous title. Again, I already mentioned it. Those recommenders that are not prone to following instructions or submitting on time, they can derail a beautifully put together package and a wonderful candidacy. So make sure that doesn't happen by giving all the right timelines, guidance, etc. And then finally, Emma was making very good reference to this. We don't want a fan letter, that just take my word for it. We want very credible, tangible, graspable letters that bring you to life through real-time experience and manifested behavior.
Absolutely. Those are great. I think they're very straightforward. We've covered them multiple times, many of them. So thank you so much, Tatiana. So to go to the next slide, Emma's going to kind of give us, there are some different, cultural context, international clients, how to approach this, if this is your background and as you're looking for the letters of recommendation. So Emma, why don't you talk to us about this?
Yeah, this is an interesting slide, isn't it? And I won't spend too long because I know we want to do some Q&A. AdComs across the schools, across the world, are very aware that they are recruiting from a pool of candidates who come from different cultures, different nationalities, different parts of the globe, and that different cultures manage things within their organizations, within their businesses, within their communities in different ways. They use different languages. Some cultures are far more kind of glowing. I mean, we said we don't want it to be too glowing, but we also on the AdCom are aware that some cultures are likely to use superlatives much more. They're likely to say, you're brilliant, you're fantastic, this client, this candidate is amazing. Whereas some cultures and some ways of working, and especially in perhaps cultures where bigger businesses can be quite hierarchical, that's just not the kind of language that's used. So admissions committees are aware of that. So if you are panicking that actually I've got a really tough boss who never says anything, you know, is amazing or brilliant, and they're just going to say, yep, this person is they need to say that you're great, really. They do need to be saying that you are stand out above and beyond your peer group, but it might be somebody that does it in the different type of language, and or does it, you know, by quantifying with statistics, or as I say, concrete performance review material or whatever. But don't panic too much, because admissions committees are aware of that. The point about translation. So yes, if you think that language is going to be an issue, you do really need to make sure that you get your recommender or you translate for your recommender into English in the same way that you would get your transcripts notarized if they are in a different language. You need to make sure that everything is done in English for the admissions committees. And that's not to say that lots of AdCom readers don't have second language capabilities, but for almost every school, I don't know if there are any schools I can think of really that don't require these to be done in English. So help your recommenders if you think that English fluency is going to be a problem. And then the last one here. So often we work with clients who come from industries where the MBA is a very familiar track. So, you know, if you're from consulting or you're from investment banking, the chances are that the people who you want to write your recommendations are very familiar with that route. You know, you come in, you might do 2 years as a consultant, you might get sponsored, you might go off to an MBA, and then you come back, you know, or you might, depending on whether it's, sorry, Tatiana, I'm thinking McKinsey, BCG, the titles are different, associate MBA consultant or consultant, you know, MBA associate, and then on to engagement manager, et cetera, et cetera. But if you are from a different industry where perhaps nobody's gone off to do an MBA before, then the person that you are choosing to do your recommendation just may not be familiar with the process. So it really is important, you know, when you have that first conversation with your recommender, to sit down with them as part of sort of working with your recommender and explain to them how the process works, and then make sure that you follow up as you go through, check that they're on track, check that they're ready ahead of time, but explain to them, again, as we've said, how valuable a part of the application process the recommendation is, and just explain to them the difference between that a strong application and a strong recommendation and a weak recommendation can make to your overall profile.
Absolutely. That was great. And we have one final slide to do our final advice, and then we'll get into Q&A. And I think we're both, everyone's going to go through this. And I think we've kind of gone over everything. So maybe I'll just, you know, use this so we can get to the Q&A and I think our final tips. But really, Emma just ended with this. Use the recommendation to complete, you know, is it complement? Actually, I'm cut off. Complement, not duplicate your essays, right? This is a complementary piece, the critical piece of your application to business school. So I think what we've really tried to, you know, share with you today is start early, be thoughtful about who you're asking, prepare them to write you the strongest lever recommendation, and help them through the process, right? Finally, final advice, like, definitely make sure that you're following up. You know from your end when it is submitted, you will get the green check mark. Your application will show that the letter of recommendation is submitted by that person. But you do, as Tatiana, I think, said, I tell my clients, tell them a week before the actual deadline, a couple days, don't tell them the deadline is the deadline, right? Like, give them that buffer space and that you are just checking in with them. And then finally, obviously, a huge thank you when it is completed. And, you know, as we said, these letters of recommendation really will shape the AdComs, you know, how they perceive your potential in many different areas. If you have 2 letters of recommendation, how they complement each other, complement your story, it is really critical. And Emma, I think, pointed out there could be 2 similar profiles, candidates, and those letters of recommendation will push one person up while it doesn't maybe push the other. That's why we do say this is a critical piece. I'm not sure everyone really gets that at the beginning, but it is, you know, the admissions committees, the reason they're continuing to ask for it is because it gives them this additional informational perspective of what have you done, the impact you've made to their business, are you valued by the company, how do you stand out amongst your peer group, what will you bring to our community at our school, and what does your future potential look like and the impact you'll make. So most importantly, start now. So really to build in that time, both for your, thoughtfulness of who to ask, and then what you want them to include, having those conversations with the recommender, sending them the reminders, backups. Hopefully there's no backups needed. But really, and you have a lot to balance on your end. So this is just an additional thing, but I think start now, start early is our best advice. Is there anything I missed, Emma or Tatiana?
No, sounds
Got it.
good.
Perfect. Okay, so I think the next slide is we are going to go to our, a little bit about Fortuna before we go into the Q&A. So thank you again for joining us, and just a little bit about Fortuna. We are a dream team of former admissions directors from the top business schools. Emma and Tatiana, my colleagues, are amazing from, again, across the globe, all the different business schools. As you can see, the expert advice that they have, knowledge from many, many years is just invaluable. And we really work as a team, which is really enjoyable. And we really look to provide that strategic guidance, definitely unbiased feedback. Like Emma said, she's going to take one for the team, blame it on me. We don't want you writing your letter of recommendation, right? And we're going to give you that credible, advice in all the different areas of the application. So if you are interested, we have free consultations. So please go to our new and beautiful website that we just launched about a week ago, which is really comprehensive. So please jump in there and sign up for a free consultation. We'd love to talk to you. And then I think our next slide should be Q&A. We'll see, but I'm gonna go to Q&A. Yeah. Okay, so I will see. So here we go. Our first person asks, can you ask clients if you were in a consulting firm, which confidentiality is important? Ask clients. Oh, does that mean, is it okay to ask a client? Well, I will tell you this. I don't know if that question is going to, I do have clients that, if they do ask someone to write a letter of recommendation, sometimes they can't be so specific to the project because that is confidential, which is totally fine. The recommender could speak to, again, what you did. It doesn't have to be exactly about what the project was. You think that's what the question is, Emma?
I think so.
Yeah. So that is absolutely okay if there's a vagueness, just a generality to the project itself. It is, again, more of what did the applicant bring? What did they work on? How did they go above and beyond their responsibilities, et cetera? Were they collaborative? Did they work across teams? So the actual project itself isn't as important in that context. So.
However, I may add, because the recommender needs to identify their title and company. That might be.
Do you think that? Okay, that
close.
Yes, absolutely. That is part of, and I will actually say this. I don't think we said this. I tell my clients, I mean, so like Emma said, the U.S. schools, many of them follow the general letters of recommendation questions. But I tell my clients, go look at the questions that are being asked of your recommenders. Many of the schools post them on their websites. If they have leadership, grids for them to fill out. But one of the questions as well is, what is your relationship with the candidate? How long have you known them? In what capacity? If there is a reason your recommender cannot answer those questions, so maybe that's not the right person to ask.
There's also just thinking about the fact that most schools won't accept recommendations sent from a personal email address.
Yes.
So you can't use Gmail or Hotmail so it does need to come from usually a work address. So that also could be a bit of an issue for this one.
Yeah, I actually just recently had someone ask me that question. HBS was a school in particular that makes that very clear. And there were some reasons on the other end. So I said, always go to the school first and see if there is a workaround, just because of it. So that is a very good point to make, Emma, that the email address from the company is required at many schools.
Yeah.
Okay, the second question, aside from informing them, how else do you ensure that your recommender doesn't use AI to write your letter? And in that case, what is submitted to the school happens to be AI written? What's the impact on the application? Very timely, good question. Who wants to cover that one? Tatiana.
So and this is an interesting question that I think pertains to even other parts of the application. And it's it's moving. Things are shifting now as we speak now on the front of AI, but always maintaining kind of the human in the loop, so to speak. So even if the first pass was generated by AI, making sure that there is the editing and adding the voice of the recommender, it's important. And so, I mean, AI is always a great starter to go from nothing to, starting something from scratch, but then making sure that the human in the loop is always there. And so, yes, no, that would be the caveat. It's not an outright no, stay away from AI, but it's really leverage the technology, making sure that there's the human in the loop and that the tone and the voice, of the recommender it comes through in the letter.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Along with the fact that schools do recognize that AI is being used in different components of the application. So a lot of schools will now ask whether it has been used. Obviously, they're not going to ask your recommender though. So really, really important, as Tatiana says, that you are in the story and that your examples specifically are in the story. And if you make sure that your recommender's on board with that, then you should be okay.
Yeah, I agree. And our next question, I don't know if this is actually a follow-up to the first, but I work in internal audit, and I had this conversation with my recommender. He's reluctant to include specific figures as achievements because of our confidentiality agreements with the company.
So I think though, if you're not identifying the actual project itself, but you are talking sort of about a project for a consumer goods company where you increased revenue by X% or whatever it might be, I think, yeah, audit's a tricky one though, isn't it? I'm just trying to work out how you would get around that. But I think sometimes you can quantify somebody's achievements without identifying the company that it's for or the project that it's for. If that makes sense.
I agree, and it's more because we're not talking about specifics. We're talking about direction of travel, orders of magnitude, and so the specificity can be sanitized, but still convey
that's a good phrase.
The magnitude of of the impact.
Yeah, I agree. I like the word sanitized. I agree. Yeah. It probably will take a little bit more time, but just so the person asking the question knows, I think this sounds like maybe it's still the right person to ask, and I think this is definitely a workaround, that it's the letter of recommendation will still be showing, again, those traits that you have, how you performed, demonstrated this with sanitizing the names of the company, the project itself, industry, etc., which isn't as important. Just so you know, that won't take away from the value of that letter of recommendation. So that's great. I so appreciate the questions today. Again, we thank everyone for joining us. And thank you, Emma and Tatiana, for your really thoughtful information about the letters of recommendation and all the steps to it, because it is, again, a key piece, but something that takes a lot of time and effort on your end, but is extremely valuable and impactful to your application for all the schools. So everyone have a great rest of your day. Good luck in this application process. And we hopefully will talk with some of you very soon. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.